Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So, the title of my speech is supposed to be "Who is responsible for our future?" Actually, that's a very short answer to that. It's us, so everybody of us. So I should maybe even leave now because all is said. But the focus is on the European Parliament elections. And as previously pointed out, I was a member of European Parliament for 4 years now, and until 2018. So I definitely know about these matters, and I'm also very closely connected to the elections, meaning the European Parliament elections as well as the national elections that we had before that in Estonia, which we won by a great majority. Why I'm not called Prime Minister, but leader of the opposition is another story which is quite longer, but I will not go there. First, let me start with the good news. The good news is that Europeans really showed up in the vote for the European Parliament elections. And the voter participation across Europe was over 51%, which is much, much higher than it was before in 2014. And this is definitely good news, and also the strong participation that we had in the European elections helped to really temper the results for the populists, because the populists usually are winning from people not showing up, all those who are in favor of something not showing up. So the pro-European forces still clearly won the majority. And what is also good news is that due to the Brexit process, the support for the European Union is all-time high. I guess it's also in Lithuania, so it is definitely in Estonia and in some other countries. But the bad news is that the populism is on the rise everywhere. Jean-Claude Juncker has said, "To love Europe is to love its nations. To love your country is to love Europe. Patriotism is a virtue. Unchecked nationalism is riddled with poison and deceit." So populism is very much related to nationalism, at least in very many countries. We can be united even if we are diverse, and we know that if we are together in Europe, then we are stronger than everybody separately. Although the populist vote didn't turn out as well as was expected, even in those countries like Italy and France, and also that the mainstream parties won the elections everywhere, there is still increased fragmentation. And for the first time in 40 years, the center-right and the center-left would no longer control the majority of the parliament. So both lost ground, liberals and Greens gained, and populists also gained compared to the last elections. As the traditional centrist parties took really blow, then they lost more than 70 seats, and also lost the majority in the European Parliament. And in contrast, the Liberals and the Greens won. And for example, my group, the Liberal group, together with French President Emmanuel Macron, picked up 32 additional seats. Liberals are definitely going to play a big part in making the king-making process here, nominating the top officials for the European Union. what is also new to this mandate is that for the first time, the Social Democrats and the EPP, meaning the European People's Party, the Conservatives, can't form a grand coalition, just the two of them. So this is new. What is also interesting, I guess you have all read the rise of the Green parties across Europe, not in really eastern part of Europe, but more in northern part and also in UK, Ireland, France and Germany, where also young people have staged marches calling the climate policy. So, although the power is said to be fragmented, and the mainstream pro-European parties still hold a majority, then the populists have gained a lot, and the fragmentation in the new European Parliament will be great. So there will be many groups. So the numbers, I mean, FDD, 56 seats. This is the group that was led by Nigel Farage. Then ENF, we had a joke in the European Parliament, ENF, called the European Nationalists and Fascists, led by Marine Le Pen, but actually I don't even know what is the actual name of this group. They have 58 seats, so quite close. Then non-attached, so those members who are not attached to any group, there are 7. And ECR, that was broadly based on the Tories of Great Britain and the Polish members from the BIS, they have 58 seats. So why am I talking about this? Is that we have more fragmentation than ever. And when we think about how European Parliament works, you don't really have coalition and opposition there. So for each topic, you need to have a majority. And even sometimes, you know, as the directives, regulations, all the rules that come out, there are groups that are working on these, you know, 5-7 people per each initiative, and they have to find a majority on each article, basically. So if you have more groups, it makes this finding a majority much harder, which means that the processes will take much longer time. And what is also interesting is that if you think about all those groups, especially the anti-Europe populist parties that there are, they are always against something. Moises Naim has written this good book called The End of Power, showing how small groups have more and more power over vetoing things. So they are always against something. They're never for something. And if they have veto powers, they actually can take big processes into hostage, so to say, that nothing happens. And this is the worry. What is good side on the fragmentation when we talk about populism is that also the populist parties among themselves are very divided on several topics. So take immigration, for example. Most nationalist parties want to limit immigration, but their solutions to the immigration problem are completely different. For example, the Italians say that, you know, we have to distribute all the migrants that we have in Italy, and you all have to take those, all the European countries. Whereas, for example, Estonian Nationalist Party or nationalist parties in the center part of Europe, they say that no, we are not taking the immigrants, so this is your problem. So it will be very interesting to see if they form a mutual position on this issue. Another topic that is very close to our hearts, I guess for Lithuania as well, is the topic of Russia. So as our nationalist parties are really anti-Russia and very, nationalistic in every sense, then if you look at the populists like Matteo Salvini, Marine Le Pen, they are very pro-Russia. They have good cooperation deals with Putin's party. Matteo Salvini has several times been photographed in a T-shirt with Putin's picture, so apparently he's a big fan. So this will be very interesting to see how this all rolls out, the topics there. So when we talk about the future, taken together, the results of the European Parliament indicated the struggle over the future of the EU, whether we are doing more things together or everybody does everything separately. So which part really wins? And what I really have to mark here is that who wins from the fragmentation, or who wins from these struggles that we have, is definitely those forces outside European Union who are interested in European Union being weak, because when we are divided, we are weaker than we are together. So also with the more of a voice in the parliament, the populists and the nationalists would also be accepted to push harder on issues like controlling the migration and the budget. But as I said, in migration issues, they have different ideas how to solve things. And they are likely to block all the plans that the pro-European parties come up with. And as I say, it's always easier to be against something than for something. The future of Europe and the European Parliament is also determined by the key issues that will come to the table of the Parliament that we have to tackle in next years. Populism is one of them, definitely, but also climate change that we have talked about a lot. And again, I turn to the populist parties. So only 3 out of 21 right-wing populist parties in the current European Parliament accept the scientific consensus of man-made climate change. So if you don't even agree on this is happening, how can you provide solutions? The other big topic is technology. So how we really tackle the issues related to the new problems that come with the technology use. All the rights, e-privacy rights, or also how to get the taxes of the big internet companies, but also cyber warfare, surveillance techniques, all these things that are already topics. So we definitely need new rules, because the current rules are very much made for the analog world, but we also need trustworthy information. But how to find solutions for this. And here I would actually point out one thing. I wanted to get the information about the average age of an MEP right now in the new parliament. And why? Because there's this great book written by Douglas Adams called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. And there he divides the attitude towards technology into 3. Everything that was there before you were born is natural. It's become, it's very, part of the nature, should be there. Everything that was created or taken into use before you became 35 is modern, revolutionary, very sexy. And everything that was invented or taken into use after you became 35 goes against the nature, should be abolished, should not be allowed. So if we take the average age of an MEP, so member of parliament, in the previous mandate, it was 51. So maybe this time it is better, but why I'm talking about this is that although this was meant as a joke, it's actually quite clear that the attitude towards technology and everything that is happening is very much related to how people see things. And if you just fight against the technology, you don't want to allow it, then you don't really tackle the issues that we have related to it. And migration I already talked about, and geopolitics, the last point about everything that's going on around us and also Europe's position in the world. So as a conclusion, I would say that the European Union is still a front runner in many things, and we have to preserve what we have accomplished, but also to keep the position that we have and the face we have during the turbulent times. And for all its dysfunction, European Union is definitely here to stay, so we have to support it. And the EU must remain the beacon of peace, freedom, and health and safety because the world is changing so rapidly. And I will end with a quote saying that I believe we can and should play our part on the world stage, not for our own vanity, but because we have something to offer. I want a Europe that leads. When the European Union stands united, we change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya, and please make choice on your seat, whatever you like. Maybe you would like in the middle. And let me introduce James Savage. James Savage is, I don't know what's happening with the microphone, is the co-founder and the publisher of The Local, not just local, The Local. And he will run the panel comprised from very, very interesting personalities. James, please.
Well, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here in Lithuania. It's the first time for me. And I think there must be something with the Lithuanian sense of humor. You've asked a Brit to moderate a panel on the future of the European Union. Well done. Hopefully there is a future there too. As said in the introduction, I am a founder of The Local. We're a network of European news sites in English trying to open up European countries to the world and facilitate a conversation in English about those countries and with those countries with the rest of the world. So we're very interested in everything that's going on in these latest European elections, and we've been covering them very closely. So now in this panel, we're going to try and work out what all this means. Now, Kaja Kallas has given us the outline of what we're going to talk about now. Are we seeing a liberal revival? Or are we just seeing the fragmentation of politics? Are we any closer to a pan-European political conversation? Or are we still stuck in 28, 27 national debates? And what will this new parliament mean for the future of European integration, for climate change, for the EU army, for migration, and for relations with the rest of the world, from Russia to Ukraine to the US? So to discuss this, we are joined by an eminent panel, one from each of the three largest groupings in the European Parliament, or representing parties connected to them. So I'd like to invite onto the stage Vigaudas Ušakas, former Foreign Minister of Lithuania, and now a consultant and a council member on the European Council of Foreign Relations. And he is affiliated to the EPP Homeland Union. And also Vytenis Andriukaitis, European Commissioner for Health and Food Safety, and he is a Social Democrat. Thanks. Hi. Hi. Okay, so lovely to have you here. Lovely to be here. So we've got 40 minutes where we're going to try and work out how to make sense of this extremely complicated and unprecedented situation in the European Parliament and in Europe as a whole. To start with, I'd like to ask the two of you who've just joined us to give your immediate reflections on what we should expect from this new European Parliament and how will it differ from the old one. Perhaps I could start with you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. First of all, I fully agree with your main remarks about fragmentation, about very complicated view from side of European Parliament. But what we do expect now, time to wait. And to have maybe 2 months and to see how can we behave together. First of all, looking at possibilities to build, first of all, coalition within the European Parliament. Now is number 1. Are we capable to see coalition of 4 political groups? 4. Well, it'll be nice. Greens, Liberals, EPP, Social Democrats. Or it will be majority. Once again, more or less, strong majority. Of course, we all know that we need to have constructive majority. Yeah. Constructive, pro-European, forward-looking majority. It's a very difficult one. Okay, maybe 4, maybe 3, okay, EPP, Social Democrats, Liberals. Once again. But I am very worried about those, those possibilities to see only 3. Because my experience, 5 years experience, I have very tough portfolio, very tough. If you touch, for example, glyphosate, of course, it's, because glyphosate was political topic in France, in the UK, in Germany, yes, not in Lithuania. In Lithuania, nobody knows about glyphosate, nothing. But when you are speaking about green wave, it's because of pesticides, because of Monsanto, because of and glyphosate. And if you look at glyphosate situation, it can divide all political families together in different groups. And of course, also then you can ask yourself, are you capable to solve such problem? Because it's about climate change, about agriculture, about sustainability, about many topics, without Greens. Those 3 political families, Liberals, Social Democrats, and EPP, will be under permanent attacks from Greens, for sure. And it can help them to see much stronger voices from different, populists and with different radical. And you can see them mass in European Parliament. From my point of view, now it's time to understand that we need now to have strong majority, but based on some very important but agreeable principles. And then all political families should discuss what they can do together and where they can say stop because environment around EU is very difficult. Now we have 3 capitals, Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. All different, but all are playing more or less in the same game, looking at EU to being smaller, more divided, and less capable to act as EU as one entity at global level. Yes, and then you can understand all situation around us, within EU. Of course, I am not touching issues related to differences in every political family. For example, looking at the situation, Christian Democrat Berlusconi, yes, excellent. Real Christian Democrat, yes, or liberal, my friend Uspaskich. It's back. Or green Europe, okay. I ask myself, because for me it's very important to be more concrete in this situation, because my portfolio is a very concrete one, and they see how can they behave in different questions. But what about possibilities to keep those united? Time now is very important.
Absolutely. And how do you share those views? How do you see the fragmentation of the European Parliament now?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, let's start from the positive news, which some of them were referred already. First of all, we had a record high participation in European Parliament elections since the first time elections took place in 1979, more than 50%. Secondly, you know, all the prognosis and forecasts by many influencers and the journalists, with all due respect, have not been met. I mean, you know, the Eurosceptics received much less than what was anticipated. Thirdly, you're going to have a first time, as Kaya has mentioned, and with Tanis, you're going to have a necessity of working as a coalition of at least 3 parties, not the 2 or used to be even 1 in all times. So it will have a new character. But what matters from my point of view is, I mean, you know, mechanics, how it will work are important, but what matters from my point of view is to what extent European Parliament and European Council and the new Commission will address the issues of paramount importance for the people. It's not about so much as Spitzenkandidaten, but it's more about people wanted to vote, not because of, I mean, choice between Timmermans and Weber, but because, I mean, the Greens galvanized population in Sweden, in Germany, in other countries, to see the green agenda, CO2 emissions being addressed in a more profound manner. So what I want to say is, I think it's going to be of critical importance, the incoming, I mean, the European Council on the 20th and 21st of July, not that they would agree on the 5 crowning positions, but that they would set up similar priorities as they did 5 years ago for the Juncker's Commission. And to what extent those 5 priorities will meet the global trends which are you know, influencing the daily life of Europeans, starting from, you know, jobs and investment and growth. It's about, I mean, to what extent the European Union will be ambitious in reducing CO2 emissions, whether to 80-95% by 2050 or to net zero. To what extent the European Union will show the ambition to be a leader in artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution, and how we're going to use 170 billion euros annual budget for a breakthrough in the European Union's economic competitive strengths. Those will be the matters alongside, of course, that we are facing a much more vulnerable global order with uncertain leadership from Trump to other leaders as well.
Kaja Kallas, you were in the European Parliament for a while. You were named, I believe, one of the 40 most influential members of the European Parliament by Politico. How does a fragmented European Parliament go about acting on these issues?
Well, is this on?
Is the microphone working? It is. Can you hear Kaja? Perfect.
Okay, good. So I would actually not focus so much on the grand coalition or whatever coalition, because it only works for the positions. When the positions are there, I mean, you know, the head of the Commission is put in place, all the positions in the European Parliament, this coalition no longer works, because European Parliament is absolutely totally different from the national parliaments. You don't have classical opposition and coalition, because what happens in the national parliaments when the coalition doesn't stick together, if you don't have the votes, then the government will fall. But the Commission is not, although it acts like a government of the European Union, it's not dependent on the coalition in the European Parliament. So nothing happens if you know, Social Democrats and EPP vote differently on topics, and they do vote differently on every topic. So for us, I think it's a slippery slope. Also, all those coalitions, they need our votes to get the head of the commission in place, but and the votes are well, the talk is very, very nice, you know, all the principles that we are standing for, but later on when we go to the topics that were pointed out, you know, the real issues that we have to decide for the European people, then the coalition, the principles, everything is forgotten because the positions are already there. So you can't force the coalition to work as it will because of the fragmentation of the different groups as well. Because, for example, take the Liberals. In the Liberal group in the European Parliament, for example, from my country, two of the biggest adversaries, us and the Centre Party that we are constantly fighting in the local level, we are the members of the same group. And it means that we very often don't share the same views. And it is the same for EPP, it's actually EPP less, but all the other groups more, that you don't have the group cohesion, really. So everything is decided separately, is discussed separately until, you know, the very articles that have to be voted. And in the European Parliament, it is so often when you see that, you know, half are in favor, half are against, and then, you know, this falls. So basically, one vote matters.
Do you have a comment on that?
A little bit? Just yes or not, because you are right that we need to have some, first of all, we need to elect something, yes, President of the European Commission, but we need to have common priorities together. 10 Juncker's priorities were built because of 3 main political families stayed together and signed agreement. And only after those 10 priorities, we have possibility to present Commission working program and all steps. Without them, priorities will be very difficult. We need to have mission-driving initiatives, which will help us to join issues together with mainstreams of European Parliament. Sometimes you can see a necessity to have common grounds, cornerstones. And then, of course, in different questions, you are right, you can see differences. It doesn't matter. But mainstreams should be built on consensus, on political consensus. And please keep in mind, when Martin Schulz was Speaker of European Parliament and Jean-Claude was President of the Commission, at that time we have very excellent cooperation because I know very well. We spent a lot of time in discussions with leaders of political groups together, sitting around the table. Yeah. And we need now to understand, we need to have some mainstreaming topics.
No,
otherwise,
I agree that we have to have the topics, but I'm really practical. That when it comes down to, you know, really deciding the issues, the priorities is easy to decide, but the priorities, you know, they form the agenda. So they form the directives, the regulations that have to be put forward, and these will not go so easily. So, you know, everybody is fragmented then.
Can I come to you touched on the European Parliament's role in deciding the big positions. President of the European Commission being the most powerful one. Now we had this process, the Spitzenkandidat process, where each of the political blocs would appoint a Spitzenkandidat, and the winner, the largest bloc, would provide then the President of the European Commission. Now, if this were to be followed, we would have the next President of the European Commission would be Manfred Weber of the EPP from Germany. But there are many other factors in play here, right? How do you see this going, and how would you like to see this process evolve?
I would actually ask the audience, how many of you know all the Spitzenkandidaten of different groups in the local level that, you know, you really know? I don't know, who were the candidates for the European Commission, head of the European Commission. I would say, I don't know, maybe you are too, oh, well, one, I see one, two, okay. But my point being that, you know, European citizens, you know, far from the center, if you don't have Manfred Weber in Germany, then, you know, people in Estonia have no clue who is Manfred Weber and didn't know that voting for EPP in Estonia means that they vote also for this candidate there. So I wouldn't give too much emphasis on this.
And we have a very well-informed audience here, and if this very well-informed audience doesn't know who the Spitzenkandidaten are, that was my impression from your show of hands, then yes, it's a...
But I think, I mean, first of all, I think it's a welcome initiative for a second time to have a pan-European debate between among the candidates for the top European job. Having said this, exactly, I just saw the Gallup result of the opinion poll that only 21% of the Germans knew who Weber was. So, I mean, it's a desirable, welcome, but still way to go. Secondly, of course, in a more fragmented European Parliament composition, there are different views, whether that should be the person who will lead, and we know officially that Emmanuel Macron, the Portuguese, the Spanish prime ministers have challenged the credentials of Weber of having no government position before that, and his lack of experience in terms of management. And that's why I think the field is pretty open and very unpredictable at this stage, who's going to occupy which job. What is clear is that the European Parliament will have a say on two positions. First, whom they're going to elect as President of European Parliament, and secondly, whom they're going to confirm under the proposal of the European Council, 28 leaders of the member states. They will nominate, they will propose the President of the Commission, who has to be approved by European Parliament.
Can we see a situation where they would reject their proposal? Go on, go ahead.
May I ask you, you know, only 21% of Germans knows about Weber? No, you know, when I ask Germans, do you know Weber? Yes, answer is, very nice music. I like Weber music very much. Of course, I'm joking. Of course, you are right. You are right. Speaking about idea of Spitzencandidate, yes, you're right. It's just the beginning, because it was a pity that some blocked possibility to have partially common list of European Parliament elections, common list, to help people to understand what does it mean to vote in favor of EPP. It means then why? Because, you know, just we are looking at very deep questions. Communitarian method, intergovernmental method, and democratic control. Because Parliament is about democracy, about control. But now, if you are looking at Council, in Council prevails philosophy of intergovernmentalism. They are ready to exclude Spitzencandidate, exclude, absolutely, no doubts. And then you can see the, you know, deepest conflict between intergovernmentalism and community method as such, or being Commission stronger or weaker. That is a question.
Isn't this a point, Vigaudas Ušackas, that the European Parliament should assert itself in the matter of choosing the next president of the Commission, for instance, and the other positions? Should it not take power into its hands at this point in time?
Well, you know, the reality is that, I mean, formally, yes, European Parliament will have to approve the candidate which will be presented by 28 leaders of the EU member states. Having said this, you know, it's going to be like election of the Pope, even if not more complex, because you have to decide on the 5-star crowning. It's the President of the European Parliament, which the Parliament will decide. Then you have a President of the Commission, which European Parliament has to approve, and then you have 3 more very important positions: is who's going to succeed Donald Tusk as President of the European Council, who chairs the meetings of the heads of government and states, and then you have a high representative, foreign minister of the European Union, and head of the European Central Bank. So it's going to be It's going to be a compromise based on political affiliation, based on geographical representation, not only East and West, but also large and small countries, and increasingly, of course, I mean, it's already clear that all Spitzenkandidaten and 70 leaders of the EU have signed the letter calling that at least 2 out of 5 women would be nominated for those 5 key positions. So that will also have an important factor, which will have to be considered in this compromise.
I mean, this sounds to me, Kai Kallas, very much like backroom horse trading. I give you this, you give me that. How attractive is that to voters? Is it good for the for the image of the European Union?
Yeah. You pointed out just a very, very important thing. I think we can't forget that European Parliament is not only legislative body, but it's also representative body. And I think, you know, because of the populist parties that gained a lot of ground in European Parliament, it's actually good because their voice is more heard on the European level as well, because these people represent the views that people have. So I think even though the discussions will be much harder, and I can say that from the being inside the European Parliament, working for in the European Parliament, the nationalist parties, the populist parties, they never take part in the real, I mean, decision designing. They're never there. They're always, you know, giving interviews somewhere in their home ground, talking about how all this is very bad, what they are doing there. But still, I think this is important, and we can't, you know, lose this just by, you know, you get this, we get this, then we're fine, and then 5 years we're fine. We're not fine. Those topics that I pointed out, the climate change, the migration, technology, all this, and also geopolitics, the position of European Union in the world, which is very much related to how united we are. So a lot of problems ahead, and definitely big challenge is not to forget the people.
Of course, big challenge is do not forget people. Do not forget social Europe. Do not forget social pillar. Do not forget social scoreboard. Do not forget our obligations to do something more. Speaking about social agenda. And you know, this can unite a lot of people, because people are very worried about. You know, speaking about salaries, speaking about social protection, speaking about pensions. Here you can see a lot of people voices.
I think we hear political conflict here. Social Europe on the Social Democrat side.
No,
you want to see a sort of more social pillar.
Of course, I'm on the other side, but I want to say that I think, you know, all this designing of too many rules that go to very, very bottom is the reason why so many people are against European Union. So I beg to differ in those topics.
You were nodding along there.
No, I think one thing which we have to give credit to the outgoing Commission and President Jean-Claude Juncker is indeed that he has taken a lead in terms of moving Commission towards deregulation or lesser regulation. I remember talking to him several times when he said, well, why should we introduce all the standards, which, I mean, are not of necessity in terms of, I mean, or even becoming an impediment for greater competitive edge for European industries. And the number of initiatives, Vytenis, please correct me, I think have fallen from the annual, like 120, what used to be under the previous Commission annually, down to like 20, 25, which I think is a healthy development, so to be more focused and less regulating what is unnecessary.
But yes, it's not, of course, you are right, it's about less and more about speaking of regulation, but when we ask member states, please tell us, which areas do you need to keep back? 28 member states, and we asked, yes, are you ready to keep something back from Commission shoulders? And the answer was, no, no, no. It's a strange issue.
I'm just talking about really specific issues. For example, we are small countries on the edge of European Union, and very many rules. I would say that they are protectionism in disguise, meaning that you design the rules and then you go into those and you understand it's because the German and the French governments don't want us to compete on their markets. Therefore, they design the European rules so that the rules actually for us to follow are very, very difficult. I bring you one example regarding posting of workers, regarding the, how to translate this, the long distance drivers rules regarding those. These are all that our drivers, our businesses that provide the services couldn't provide the services in the Central Europe. It is actually protectionism in disguise. And when we think about that European Union is all about freedom of movement of goods, people, and capital, then we are going to the wrong direction.
And because the argument on posted workers, if I understand it correctly, is that the rich countries like the one that, well, Sweden, where I live, where wages are higher, are trying to protect their wage levels from countries with lower wage levels.
And the same companies that fight for those are the ones that come to our countries and make their factories in our countries because the salaries are lower. So come to Lithuania, pay the same salary as you pay in Germany, and then we can talk about posting of workers and not allowing it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's hypocrite.
Okay, I think it would be good to organize separate debates about posting workers directive or mobility package, because it's not so simple as you just mentioned. Okay, doesn't matter. Social dumping is a big problem now, everywhere. Differences between oldest and member states and eastern part of European Union are big, regionally very big. Social picture, social inequalities in countries are very big challenge for all of us. Speaking about idea, equal pay for equal job, doesn't matter where you are. Equal pay for equal job. I think it is generally acceptable idea to European Parliament because it's European Parliament voice. But how can we realize it in real life? That's the question. Of course, but I think it's not about more or less regulation. It's about something deeper, about to have cohesion in the EU between and within member states and between member states, because it is very challenging time. Abandoned regions, they are voting in favor of so-called populists or nationalists. And it's true. But we need to address people's concerns. And those social matters are very hard topic.
I would side with my Estonian sister on this. Because I think what matters for the European Union and what's important is that we have a level playing field, that we have equal grounds for the competition. If you address postal workers, if you address agricultural support, it's different. You don't have the same criteria applied. Or if you have even some projects which, on the one hand, are supposed to meet the European Union energy strategy, and they receive exceptions, like a Nord Stream 2. That does not comply to the level playing field, and it does not comply also to the EU strategy. And that's where we see, unfortunate, that sometimes some members are more exceptional or more accepted than the others, which undermine credibility of the EU.
Yes, you are right, that we need to guarantee fair competition.
Yep, that's
fair, but not using social mechanisms guaranteeing fair competition. Let's look into details. Fair competition, what can we do guaranteeing equal competition environment. But what about social fairness? That's also the same
The
question.
tennis campaign is over.
To take this to a more...
It's about future of Europe. Without social agenda, Europe will face very big difficulties, believe me.
To take this to a more general level, I mean, here we see, I think we see an area where, in many respects, we see countries in this part of Europe having a slightly different view to countries in other parts of Europe. If you look at posted workers, Sweden and France, for instance, are very much in favour of stronger regulation of posted workers, whereas countries in this region are much more against it. But we're seeing also lines drawn through Europe on how highly we prioritize climate change. For instance, when you look at the results of the elections and how Greens have done, and you were touching on this earlier. I mean, are we seeing, how do we prevent Europe sort of dividing up even more into regional blocks on these issues?
I think it's very difficult. I would add one more to this, is technology. The northern part, I mean, the Baltics, the Nordics, very pro-technology. All these new things that come from down, from Germany down, everybody very skeptical, very anti-developments in that regard. I don't think it's we can avoid the divisions. The divisions are there. I think also in terms of our region, for example, regarding the technology, I think we should cooperate much, much more, because our region is ready to move forward much faster than the others, and we should use this competitive advantage.
You're nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. The digital single market concept, yes, and of course, possibilities to implement communication on, for example, my portfolio, e-health. I see only one way to encourage our region to cooperate much more. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Sweden, Germany, and around the Baltic Sea. We can show that Baltic Sea region is capable to deliver, speaking about digital single market, regionally to be leader. No doubts, and we need to do more.
I think whether we speak on technology or education or foreign policy, as a matter of fact, what matters is that we do avoid divisions, but respect differences. And that's a modus vivendi of European Union, that our strengths derives from diversity. And I remember in my times when I was the EU ambassador to Russian Federation in Moscow, we used to joke with Federica Mogherini, in an ideal world, the EU would be strong if Rome and Vilnius would speak from the same notes, but they are different notes. What matters is, notwithstanding the historical backgrounds and animosities and sensitivities, still Rome and different personalities in Rome and Vilnius, we managed to agree and to stay in consensus among 28. And that's real virtue and the force of European Union, respecting differences, but staying the course together. And that's what the EU as a global actor means for the world.
Yes, but what we need in this case, we need minimum 4 political families in European Parliament to stay together, to guaranteeing sometimes more cohesion and more strongest voice when we build our homework, bridging differences. It will be okay, but I think we need now to understand, we need European Parliament, strong European Parliament, more coherent, more united, and of course, sometimes speaking in one voice.
We're on the subject of unity. I've got to put in a question about my home country and the effect that it's had on the European Union. What effect has Brexit had, do you think, on these elections, on people's attitudes to the European Union in the other 27 countries, and on the direction of the European Union as a whole? Can I start with you?
First of all, I am a medical doctor. I always think about prevention and about vaccination. And Brexit vaccinate 27 member states. Very nice. Now you can see in France, no, it's not Brexit. No. Italy, no, it's not Brexit. We need to change something in Europe. Okay, it means very nice, very good example. How can we behave, keeping in mind possibility to vaccinate our societies.
I'm glad we could help.
Now I know what a historical...
Of course, this price is a very big one, no doubt. But
Vytenis, now I know what a historical mistake Lithuanian government did, sending you not to London but to Brussels. Maybe you have vaccinated Brits from not going Brexit.
yes, you are right. You are right. But you know, believe me, I am very proud that today...
Not too late, in fact.
But today Jean-Claude told to the press that, it was a mistake not to be involved in debates in the UK in time of preparation.
That's exactly, being now out
I
of the government.
I will be more than happy to be there. Of course, and to help people once again. Because if you see Jeremy Hunt, Jeremy Hunt talks at Conservative Party meeting that EU is the same like Soviet
Jeremy
Union.
Hunt, Foreign Minister for the United Kingdom, who
Guys, about what he is speaking.
He said some, controversial things recently about the European Union, indeed. Yes. Do you agree that Brexit has inoculated, that's vaccinated Europe against?
Yes, that is true if you look at the rhetorics of the populist anti- or Eurosceptic parties. First, before they said, I think in most of the European countries that we have to exit European Union and then it will all be good. Now they say we have to change the European Union. So actually they also understand, and populists have a very good nose for this, what the people think. And the people's support for European is all-time high, and now they're saying that we have to change the European Union, not to exit it.
Well, I still hope there is a miracle that British will get even into a bigger mess. I wish they do. They deserve. Some of them who initiated the referendum.
I don't live there anymore, it's fine.
The referendum, sorry for being so blunt, but very frank. And there is a magic solution which Brexit will not happen. It's a very small, tiny chance, but it is. If it happens, I think one of the top priorities for the EU will be really to negotiate a new relationship with the United Kingdom, which will have of paramount importance as for Britain, as for the European Union. And last, I fully agree with Vytenis. I think the Commission and the rest of EU politicians were too timid. Yeah. And they shied away from the discussion, which I was participating myself. I have broken all diplomatic rules, and I went to London for the debates with Conservatives, my friends, and with Labour, because I care about EU and I care about Britain as a friend of Lithuania, which I didn't see that taking place by Vytenis or Jean-Claude Juncker, because that was a political decision by the Commission not to interfere, which I think was a mistake. We are so much intertwined. The culture, you come from Sweden, it's already common political culture that politicians from right and left wing go across the borders campaigning and supporting the candidate of like-minded parties. Yeah. And we didn't do nothing. We just left, with all due respect, the debate moving to the, beyond the control and rational arguments, which were necessary. And I hope we could have made a change from the European perspective.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left, or I'm not sure whether my timing there is in sync with everyone's watches. Is that all right? But just on that point, just to wrap up, do you think that we've seen a more pan-European debate in this election, and do you think that we can keep going in that direction in future European elections?
Generally, yes. I saw a lot of pan-European debates. And sometimes we are using the word Eurosceptics. But it's not the same like those who are against European Union. Those Eurosceptics also, they need to have debates about future of Europe, of which way is the best for their understanding. And look at today's I don't know how you describe Macron political family. Liberals? I don't know. Maybe conservatives? I don't know. Maybe socialists? It's something mixture. But they also have idea to change something. But it's very important to have pan-European debates in which direction we can move. CBU declaration is a good example.
Do you see this, or do you see 28 countries all having their own conversations?
I think we might be a bit distracted by this right-left discussions, or all these ideological discussions. I think it's more the division of who wants to destroy and who wants to build. So we can build on the things that we have. Destroy is very easy. Like, cook a dinner is difficult, eat it very easy. Destroy always much easier than to build. So I think this is important. And when you ask me about whether we are more united in the new set or new mandate, I will say that actually no, because even in the previous mandate, we saw more and more nationalist views on even coming from the mainstream parties, because they, this is what people are talking about back home, and they are taking this over. So rather, I think it will be less pan-European and more, everybody to themselves. Although I like to be optimist, but I'm afraid that this is going to be like this.
As a final word, more united or more divided in Europe in the next?
I think we're going to have more diverse and more cohesive Europe, because that's, the external factors and internal demands will certainly drive the agenda of both European Parliament, European Council, and the Commission, because only united and cohesive we can address those challenges of global stage.
Well, I think that's a very good note to finish on. So, Kaja Kallas, Vigaudas Ušakas, and Vytenis Andriukaitis, thank you so much for a really interesting discussion.